right? Look at how they're described. They're the Navy SEALs of the Israeli army. All of them is wearing a sword. They're all experienced in battle, and each with his sword at his side and prepared for the terrors of the night. Solomon's sending a message to his bride, and this is it. We're covered. Ain't nothing going to happen to us, babe. Fellas, one of the greatest things that your wives need, we'll talk about this later in the series, but your wives need security. They need to know that you're not going anywhere, that she's safe with you, that you're going to provide for her and protect for her, her life. And this is the message that Solomon is sending. I got 60 of my baddest guys. They're our groomsmen. Let's get married. It goes on and it says this. King Solomon made for himself the carriage. He made it from wood that came from Lebanon. Its posts he made of silver. Its base was gold. Its seat was upholstered with purple. Its interior lovingly inlaid by the daughters of Jerusalem. Oh, if you've been here the last couple of weeks, you know the daughters of Jerusalem kind of chime in every once in a while in this story. And apparently they were skilled craftsmen. They worked at, Pimp My Ride, and they did the upholstery. And so here they are. They've helped out with the carriage. What a nice thing. Great wedding present. So she says, "Come out, you daughters of Zion." So she's calling to her bridesmaids, the ones who made the seat. And she says, "Look at King Solomon. He's wearing his crown, the crown which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, the day that his heart rejoiced." Underline that in your Bibles and your notes if you'd like. Our wedding day is to be a day that our heart rejoices in. Do you remember your wedding day, those of you who are married? I barely do, just parts. And not because I wasn't paying attention, because my head was swimming with excitement and with, oh my goodness, we're getting married and all those things. I remember Eleanor and I talked before the ceremony began. We kind of broke that whole seer when she walked. But we wanted to pray together and just talk, so we did that. I remember that. I remember her coming down the aisle, and the guy that her father got to do our pictures, stopping her twice. Not once, but twice, to get the perfect picture, which ended up not being a perfect picture. Anyway, and me being like, dude, just let her get here. I've got to marry that girl. Stop stopping her. And then I remember we did our vows, the ones that you repeat after me. We decided not to do the repeat after me, and we just decided to make them up on the fly. Those of you getting married, do not do this. Your brains are ineffective at that point, and the video is pretty hilarious, so we got that going for us. But then the thing I remember most about my wedding is I just smiled. I had this big, goofy grin on my face from the time the morning, I woke up in the morning to the time that we were done with the wedding. And here's why. We had saved what was going to happen that night for what was going to happen that night. And I was rejoicing in anticipation. And I think that kind of plays out here with Solomon. It's the day that he rejoices in, because in his heart and in her heart, they know they've done this right. And so one last time, let me whack this nail with this hammer one last time for all of our single folks out there. You've got to wait. To honor God, absolutely, but just practically speaking, the best sex that you'll ever have is with your spouse post-wedding day. That's how it's supposed to work. So be patient and wait for the right time. God created sex for a context. It's in the covenant of marriage. And sex outside of that context, I believe, does two things. One, it will harm a good relationship. Here's what I mean. If you're two people trying to follow Christ or even if you're two people who aren't trying to follow Christ, I think this bears out. If you get involved sexually, it retards the development of your relationship. It becomes this counterfeit intimacy, this substitute for the things that should really be going into your relationship. You can fight and bicker and just not even have anything in common, be incompatible, but the sex is good. And what it does is it undermines God's intent for your relationship as it's developing. It fast forwards into a part of marriage that you're supposed to only experience in marriage. And it robs you of that important developmental time. So it harms a good relationship, and sometimes it can even prolong a bad one. There's some people who get involved physically, intimately. They bear children together and stuff like that, and now because of all these things that have occurred, now you're locked into this lifelong relationship or, you know, some kind of form, whatever, with this person that you don't have anything in common with. Now, God, here's a great thing. Some of you are like, oh man, that's me. Listen, God can reap, blessing out of stuff that was sown improperly or sown at the wrong time. God's the great redeemer of all things. Someone say amen. So I'm not up here to hammer you guys, but I'm here. If you're on this side of a marriage relationship and you're wondering, because the culture says, of course you have sex. Of course you kick the tires. Of course you take this car for a spin. You want to know if this works, if we have chemistry. Oh, listen, that will all take care of itself. In fact, it's meant to be an outgrowth, an extension of the chemistry that you create and the intimacy that you create apart from sex. To me, it's like the trees around here that fell down during the hurricanes. I drove around during the hurricanes in 2004 like an idiot because I had just moved to Florida and thought it'd be fun. And I remember seeing all these huge trees. In fact, if you might remember back one of the storms, there was a huge tree that fell down and covered over Sefner, Valrico, and Clay Streets right behind us here. And I mean, it was monstrous. It had to be 10, 12 feet in diameter or something like that. And I thought, wow, what a wind. I mean, how hard was that wind blowing to snap that tree off at the trunk? Well, I got closer and I realized it hadn't snapped off at the trunk. It had been pulled out of the ground by its roots. And I thought to myself, how is this possible? I mean, this big, huge tree gets yanked out of the ground. So I asked someone from here, and they explained to me, well, the root systems in these big trees aren't able, in our sandy ground, or I don't know what it was, but they aren't able to go down deep. They have to spread out wide. And that's how they get the water for the tree to grow. And so when these huge winds blow, the weight of this big tree just pulls its roots right out of the ground. And I thought to myself, wow, this is a relationship that experiences sex before its time. That sexual side of a relationship outside of marriage is like roots spreading out wide. Now, the relationship still grows, it still goes in places, but when the wind blows, if that's all that relationship is based on, that relationship is coming down just like the tree did. Instead, what we need is we need to be like some of these trees that grow up in the desert, date palms and such. In Psalm chapter 1, it talks about a righteous man being like a tree planted by the rivers of water. And the tree that they're describing there is one of these trees that you'd see in an oasis. And in those trees, there's more tree under the ground than there is above the ground. Did you know that? They have to go so far down to get to the water table that their taproot just keeps growing and growing and growing until they find the water that it needs to grow, and then the tree grows. And listen, I defy you. Try to go knock down one of those trees. They're the only ones that stand in the midst of a storm. And so the things that we've been talking about in the past couple of weeks have been these taproot type things, learning to communicate, having intimacy outside of the physical, having tenderness and dealing with the foxes that can come into your life. That's taproot stuff. Physical intimacy outside of its context, which is marriage, that's widespread root stuff. Jesus talked about a wise man building his house upon the rock. Remember that? And when the storms of life came, the house would stand. But a foolish man built his house upon the sand. And when the storms of life came, it went flat. I think that's what the Bible teaches about intimacy outside of marriage. It's a house built on sand. It's a tree spread wide with its roots. When life happens, it falls. So may we, as we head towards the altar, may we understand one last time, all you single people out there, this is meant for marriage. It's God's very best for you. It's His gift for you in marriage. And look at me, everybody look at me, especially you single folks. Some of you might be involved in a physical relationship right now. Let this be the last day. Some of you might be in between relationships and this has always been your pattern. Let the next relationship be the one that does not follow suit. Honor God with this so that on your wedding day you can rejoice and be glad that you did. Are we with me? All right. You want to see them at the honeymoon? Doesn't matter. Here it comes. All right. Chapter 4 starts out like this. They are no longer at the wedding, and they have moved, as my friend Tommy Nelson calls it, to the Jerusalem Hilton. And they are there in the honeymoon suite, and things are about to start happening. Everybody get ready to blush. She's going to undress. This is a description, the husband's description of his wife undressing. He's going to undress her in his words from head to toe. Here we go. How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. I think that's how he said it. Your eyes behind your veil are doves. He's talking about them being, gentle and beautiful. He's watching her take her veil off that she had been wearing at the wedding, and now it's been discarded. Look what he says next. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from Mount Gilead. Ah, wow.